She spent 40 years teaching kids in those hallways. He spent his nights quietly mopping them. Everyone thought he was just the janitor until the day she married him, and her greedy daughter tried to destroy it all. What that daughter never saw coming. The man she just called the help could have bought the entire school 10 times over. This is a true style story of love, betrayal, and the sweetest revenge money can't buy. Gloria Thompson had spent more than 4 decades in the same red brick high school on the edge of town. She taught English to generations of teenagers, coaxing Shakespeare out of reluctant mouths and turning dusty classics into something that felt alive. When she retired at 65, she thought she would finally have time to read all the books she'd assigned but never finished herself. Instead, she found herself drifting back to the school almost every day, volunteering in the library, shelving returns, helping kids with college essays. The hallways still smelled like floor wax and teenage anxiety, and somehow that comforted her. That's where she first really noticed Harold Jenkins. He was the night janitor, a fixture as reliable as the old radiator that clanked every winter. Most people barely saw him. Teachers left at 4, students by 3:30, and Harold arrived at 6. But Gloria often stayed late, grading or reorganizing shelves, and she'd hear him before she saw him, soft humming old jazz standards, maybe Ella Fitzgerald or Louis Armstrong, drifting down the empty corridor. One winter evening, snow piling up outside, she was struggling with 3 heavy boxes of donated books. The bottom one split just as she reached the library door, paperbacks tumbling across the floor. "Let me get those," a low voice said. Harold appeared, pushing his wide mop bucket. He knelt without ceremony, gathering books with careful hands. His flannel shirt was faded but clean, sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms weathered from years of honest work. Silver hair, neatly combed, eyes the color of storm clouds, kind and unhurried. "Thank you," Gloria said, flustered. "I'm usually better at handling books." He smiled, small and genuine. "Books are heavier than they look. So are years." They talked for a few minutes about the snow, about how the school's boiler still made the same groan it had in 1982. Nothing deep, but something in his quiet manner stayed with her. After that, their paths crossed more often. She'd bring him coffee on cold nights. He'd leave a note on her volunteer desk when he found a rare edition in the lost and found. They talked about music, about gardening. He kept a small plot behind his apartment building, and about the students. Harold knew every kid's name, even the ones who caused trouble. He noticed who came to school hungry, who wore the same hoodie 3 days in a row. One spring afternoon, as dogwood petals drifted past the windows, he asked if she'd like to get coffee somewhere that wasn't the faculty lounge. She said yes before she could overthink it. They dated slowly, the way people in their late 60s sometimes do. Dinners at quiet restaurants, Sunday drives through the countryside, evenings on her small porch listening to crickets. Harold never talked about money. He lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment above a hardware store, drove a 20-year-old blue pickup with a dented fender, and wore the same 3 flannel shirts in rotation. But he listened like no one else. When Gloria spoke about losing her husband Richard 10 years earlier, how the house felt too big, how grief sneaked up on her at grocery stores, Harold didn't offer platitudes. He just held her hand and let the silence be enough. 2 years passed like that. Then one October evening, under a sky full of stars sharp enough to cut glass, Harold got down on one knee in her backyard, knees creaking, and asked her to marry him. The ring was simple, white gold with a single small diamond. "It's not much," he said, almost apologetic. Gloria laughed through tears. "It's everything." She didn't need grand gestures. She had spent her life teaching teenagers that love was in the details. The margin notes, the turned down pages, the quiet presence. Harold was all of that, but not everyone saw it that way. Gloria Thompson had always believed that the best things in life were built slowly, layer by layer, like the careful revision of a favorite poem. So when it came time to plan her wedding to Harold Jenkins, she approached it the same way she had once approached teaching a difficult sonnet, with patience, intention, and a deep respect for meaning. The venue was never in question. The high school gymnasium, the very place where she had spent 40 years of her life, was the only choice that felt right. It wasn't grand in the conventional sense. Polished wooden floors, scuffed from decades of basketball games, high rafters that echoed with the ghosts of pep rallies, folding chairs that creaked in familiar ways. But to Gloria, it was sacred ground. She had directed plays on that stage, comforted crying teenagers in the bleachers, celebrated retirements, and mourned losses in those hallways. It was where she had become the woman she was, and it was where she wanted to begin the next chapter of her life. She enlisted the help of former students who had gone on to become event planners, florists, even a lighting designer who had once failed her sophomore English class but swore he'd learned more about storytelling from her than anyone else. Together, they transformed the space. Fairy lights were strung across the rafters like constellations. Round tables were draped in soft ivory linen, each crowned with centerpieces of white roses, baby's breath, and open vintage books. Pages turned to passages about love that Gloria had taught over the years. A string quartet from the current music department would play arrangements of jazz standards, a nod to Harold's quiet humming. The caterer was the mother of a former student who now ran the best Italian restaurant in town. Every detail was chosen with care, and every penny came from Gloria's retirement savings and the small inheritance Richard had left her. Harold watched the planning unfold with his usual quiet amusement. "You're turning a gym into a cathedral," he said one evening as they sat on her porch, reviewing fabric swatches. "I want it to feel like us," she replied. "Simple, but full of stories." He kissed her temple. "It already does." The one shadow over the preparations was Vanessa. Gloria's only child had always been a bright, beautiful girl, top of her class, cheerleader, debate champion. But somewhere along the way, ambition had hardened into entitlement. Vanessa married Craig 10 years ago, a man whose charm was as polished as his shoes and whose business ideas never quite worked out. They lived in a sprawling suburban house with columns that looked borrowed from a magazine, drove cars that gleamed even in rain, and posted curated photos of European vacations that Gloria quietly helped fund. When Gloria called to share the engagement news, the silence on the other end of the line lasted long enough to notice. "A janitor, Mom?" Vanessa finally said. "I mean, are you sure?" "He's a good man," Gloria replied, keeping her voice steady. "The best I've known since your father." More silence, then a forced brightness. "Well, congratulations. We'll be there, of course. The kids will love it." But in the months that followed, Vanessa's comments were sharp little needles. The venue was so high school. The flowers were basic. The guest list, mostly teachers, former students, neighbors, was quaint. She offered to upgrade things, hire a better caterer, bring in a DJ, rent a venue with actual ambiance. Each suggestion was wrapped in concern, but Gloria heard the judgment underneath. "I want this to be mine," she told Harold one night, frustrated after another call. "Not some performance for Vanessa's friends." Harold, ever calm, took her hand. "Then that's what it will be." She chose a champagne-colored lace dress that made her feel elegant without trying too hard. The skirt fell just below the knee, the sleeves long and delicate. When she tried it on in the small bridal shop, the owner, a former student, teared up. "Mrs. Thompson, you look like grace itself." Harold's suit was new, navy blue, perfectly tailored. He'd grumbled about spending money on it, but when Gloria saw him in it, her breath caught. He looked distinguished, handsome, in that quiet way that had always drawn her to him. They wrote their own vows. Gloria spent weeks drafting hers, crossing out lines, reading them aloud to the empty living room until they felt true. Harold's were shorter, but when he read them to her one evening by candlelight, she cried. The night before the wedding, Gloria couldn't sleep. She padded into the kitchen in her robe, made chamomile tea, and sat at the table surrounded by photos. Her and Richard cutting their wedding cake in 1978. Vanessa, in pigtails, reading aloud to her third-grade class. Harold, in his janitor's uniform, smiling shyly beside the school marquee. So many versions of herself, so many kinds of love. She whispered into the quiet house, "Please let tomorrow be kind." Outside, autumn leaves rustled against the window like pages turning. The day arrived, wrapped in perfect autumn light, crisp air, sky a flawless blue, leaves blazing red and gold against the brick of the school. Guests began arriving at 3. Former colleagues in their best dresses, ex-students now grown with children of their own, neighbors who'd known Gloria for decades. Ethan and Lily, Vanessa's children, scattered rose petals down the makeshift aisle with varying degrees of enthusiasm, Lily beaming, Ethan trying to look cool. When Gloria stepped into the gym on the arm of her old friend Marion, the quartet began playing At Last. Harold waited at the front, hands clasped, eyes shining. The navy suit fit him like it had been waiting for this moment all his life. The vows were everything they'd hoped, honest, tender, full of quiet humor and deep promises. When Marion pronounced them husband and wife, the applause was warm, genuine, the sound of people who had waited years to see Gloria happy again. The reception unfolded like a dream, tables filled with laughter, clinking glasses, stories swapped across generations. Gloria danced with Harold to an instrumental version of The Way You Look Tonight, then with former students who towered over her now. She caught sight of Vanessa at table 6, sequined dress catching every light, Craig beside her in an expensive suit, their friends laughing loudly at something on a phone. Then it began. Vanessa's voice carried over the music, sharp and theatrical. I mean, look at him, the janitor. Mom actually married the guy who mops floors. Craig, already several champagnes in, stood unsteadily. Come on, Gloria, you're a catch. You could have done way better than the help. What's he after? Your pension check? The table erupted. Vanessa's cousins, Craig's business associates, all joining in like it was the funniest joke they'd heard all year. Phones came out, recording, flashing. My landscaper has better tools, Derek, Vanessa's cousin called out. And that suit, did he borrow it from the lost and found? Another added. Laughter spread, cruel and contagious. Someone at a neighboring table shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. Gloria felt it like a physical blow. Her face burned. Harold's hand tightened on hers, under the table, steady, grounding, but she saw the flicker of pain in his eyes. She looked around the room. Marian's mouth was open in shock. A former student, now a lawyer, looked ready to stand. The principal, invited as a courtesy, shook her head slowly. Vanessa raised her glass in a mocking toast to true love and upward mobility. More laughter, phones angled for better shots. Gloria's heart pounded. For years she had excused Vanessa's behavior, told herself it was stress, or Craig's influence, or the pressure of keeping up appearances. She had loaned money, babysat, listened to complaints without protest. But this public cruelty on the day she had poured her heart into, was a bridge too far. Something ancient and fierce rose in her chest, the same fire she'd felt decades ago when defending a bullied student from a classroom of mocking peers. Gloria pulled her hand gently from Harold's and stood. The room didn't notice at first. The quartet still played softly. Conversations continued. But as she walked toward table 6, heels clicking deliberately on the gym floor, a hush began to spread. Vanessa saw her coming and smirked, expecting a whispered plea to lower her voice. Instead, Gloria stopped directly in front of her daughter and spoke in the clear, carrying voice she had used to command attention from 30 teenagers at once. Vanessa, Craig, all of you. The music stopped, every head turned. You have spent years taking from me. Money I worked decades to earn, time I could have spent on my own joy. Love I gave freely while receiving judgment in return. Today, the day I married a man who treats me with more respect than I have felt in 15 years, you chose cruelty. You mocked him. You humiliated me. You turned the happiest moment of my life into a spectacle for your amusement. Vanessa's smirk faltered. Mom, you're overreacting. I am not finished. The room was silent now. You could hear the fairy lights humming. This is my wedding. I paid for every flower, every plate, every note of music with money I saved, teaching your children's future teachers. I decide who belongs here. And you, Vanessa, Craig, and every single person at this table who laughed along, you do not. Gasps rippled through the gym. Craig tried to laugh it off. Come on, Gloria. It was just joking. Leave, Gloria said, voice steady as steel. Now. Vanessa stood, face flushing dark red. You cannot kick out your own daughter on your wedding day. I just did. Two former football players, now in their 30s, invited as guests, rose quietly and moved toward the table. The principal nodded at the security guard hired for the event. Vanessa's group gathered purses and jackets in a flurry of indignation. Phones were still out, recording furiously. Vanessa hissed as she passed Gloria. You will regret this. Everyone will see what an ungrateful. The doors closed behind them with a heavy, final thud. For a moment, the gym was utterly still. Then Marion began clapping, slow, deliberate, the sound of solidarity. One by one, others joined. Former students, colleagues, neighbors. Soon the applause filled the space, not celebratory, but deeply supportive. A few people wiped tears. Gloria returned to Harold on legs that felt like water. He stood and wrapped her in his arms. You were extraordinary, he whispered against her hair. She buried her face in his shoulder, trembling with adrenaline and grief and something that felt dangerously like freedom.
Harold held Gloria until the trembling eased. Then he gently guided her back to the center of the room, where the quartet had quietly resumed a soft melody. The applause had faded into expectant silence. "There's something I need to share," Harold said, his voice calm but resonant enough to reach every corner. "Something I should have told Gloria sooner, but I needed to know. Well, you'll understand." Gloria looked up at him, confused. "Harold?" He took both her hands and faced the room. "My full name is Harold James Jenkins. I am the sole heir to Jenkins Oil, founded by my grandfather in 1932. Over the decades, I quietly expanded and diversified the holdings. My net worth is substantial, several $billion, give or take market fluctuations." A collective gasp swept the gym. Someone dropped a fork. It clattered loudly. Gloria stared. "What are you saying?" Harold smiled down at her, eyes soft. "I'm saying I'm a billionaire, darling. But after my parents died and distant relatives appeared like vultures, I stepped away from that world. I kept control through trusted managers and a lawyer, but I chose simplicity. The night janitor job wasn't for the paycheck. It was to stay grounded, to give back without credit. The anonymous scholarships here, the library wing, the arts program that kept the theater alive, all me." A distinguished man in an impeccably tailored suit, seated quietly in the back row, stood and nodded confirmation. Harold's lawyer, Marcus, whom Gloria had met only in passing. Phones came out again, but this time in stunned wonder. Gloria's knees buckled slightly. Marion rushed forward to steady her. You're rich?" Gloria whispered. "All this time?" Harold nodded. "I wanted someone who loved the man in worn flannel who hummed jazz while mopping floors. Someone who saw me, not my money. And Gloria, you did. From the first coffee, from the day you knelt to pick up that dropped tomato at the farmer's market, you loved me, for me." Tears filled her eyes, different now. Not humiliation, but awe and a profound gratitude. The room erupted in murmurs, then applause, louder this time, joyous. Harold raised a hand gently. "I kept this from Gloria until now because I needed her to choose me at my poorest. And today, when she defended me, defended us, against cruelty, she proved what I already knew. Her heart is the real fortune. Gloria laughed through tears. You ridiculous, wonderful man. He kissed her then, in front of everyone, and the gym filled with cheers.
Harold held Gloria until the trembling eased. Then he gently guided her back to the center of the room, where the quartet had quietly resumed a soft melody. The applause had faded into expectant silence. There's something I need to share, Harold said, his voice calm but resonant enough to reach every corner. Something I should have told Gloria sooner, but I needed to know. Well, you'll understand. Gloria looked up at him, confused. Harold? He took both her hand and faced the room. My full name is Harold James Jenkins. I am the sole heir to Jenkins Oil, founded by my grandfather in 1932. Over the decades, I quietly expanded and diversified the holdings. My net worth is substantial, several $billion, give or take market fluctuations. A collective gasp swept the gym. Someone dropped a fork. It clattered loudly. Gloria stared. What are you saying? Harold smiled down at her, eyes soft. I'm saying I'm a billionaire, darling. But after my parents died and distant relatives appeared like vultures, I stepped away from that world. I attempted control through trusted managers and a lawyer, but I chose simplicity. The night janitor job wasn't for the paycheck. It was to stay grounded, to give back without credit. The anonymous scholarships here, the library wing, the arts program that kept the theater alive, all me. A distinguished man in an impeccably tailored suit, seated quietly in the back row, stood and nodded confirmation. Harold's lawyer, Marcus, whom Gloria had met only in passing. Phones came out again, but this time in stunned wonder. Gloria's knees buckled slightly. Marion rushed forward to steady her. You're rich? Gloria whispered. All this time? Harold nodded. I wanted someone who loved the man in worn flannel, who hummed jazz while mopping floors. Someone who saw me, not my money. And Gloria, you did. From the first coffee, from the day you knelt to pick up that dropped tomato at the farmer's market, you loved me for me. Tears filled her eyes, different now, not humiliation, but awe and a profound gratitude. The room erupted in murmurs, then applause, louder this time, joyous. Harold raised a hand gently. I kept this from Gloria until now because I needed her to choose me at my poorest. And today, when she defended me, defended us against cruelty, she proved what I already knew. Her heart is the real fortune. Gloria laughed through tears. You ridiculous, wonderful man. He kissed her then, in front of everyone, and the gym filled with cheers. 6 months passed. Vanessa's marriage ended. Craig left for a younger woman with fewer debts. The children stayed with her in a small apartment above a dry cleaner's. She worked retail, standing all day, smiling at customers who once attended her parties. Nights were the hardest. Alone, she watched old home videos, Gloria reading bedtime stories, sacrificing for private schools, cheering at every game. Shame became a constant companion. One rainy evening, she sat at the kitchen table and wrote a letter, 12 pages, handwritten. No mention of money, just apologies. For entitlement, for cruelty, for choosing appearances over her mother. Gloria received it on a Tuesday. She read it in the garden, tears falling onto the pages. Harold sat beside her, silent support. She's finally seeing, Gloria whispered. She's growing, he replied. Vanessa entered therapy, paid bills with her own paycheck, sent small, consistent texts, not asking for rescue, but sharing small truths. Ethan made the honor roll. Lily lost her first tooth. I was wrong about so many things. Gloria responded cautiously, but she responded. 1 year to the day after the wedding, Harold and Gloria hosted a small garden party at their home. Roses bloomed in riotous color. Fairy lights twinkled again, but this time in trees. Vanessa arrived in a simple cotton dress, hair natural, no makeup. Ethan and Lily ran to Gloria immediately, hugging her legs. Vanessa approached slowly. Mom, Harold, I don't have words big enough for how sorry I am. Gloria pulled her into a long hug. I know, sweetheart. I know. Harold shook Vanessa's hand, then pulled her into an embrace. The past is fertilizer. What matters is what grows now. They spent the afternoon talking, really talking, for the first time in years. Vanessa shared about therapy, about learning to live within her means, about teaching the children gratitude. Gloria shared about the foundation they'd started. Second chapter, helping elderly parents estranged from adult children. As sunset painted the sky gold, Vanessa said quietly, "Thank you for not giving up on me entirely." Gloria smiled. Parents don't give up, but we do learn to protect our peace. Later, lying in Harold's arms, Gloria whispered, "A year ago, I thought happiness was over for me." Harold kissed her forehead. It was just waiting for you to claim it. And in the quiet, with crickets singing and stars emerging, Gloria knew she had found not just love, but the courage to demand the life and the family she deserved.